High five. We have to do this together. Thank you for being there so we know what we're doing. I appreciate it. You're here with obviously my first YouTube live. And this is a really exciting time. We have been waiting for this for years. You're not the only one waiting for it for years. I have been dying for this to be out there for us because we all need it. Oh, thanks for the love, you guys. I'm doing this because I love you guys. It's just so unfair that we have been in the dark. We have been ignorant about what we're eating. No one's mentioning oxalates, no one's pointing it out, and no one's putting out the information that you would need to control your exposure to a significant toxin. So, hi, Jeannie. Thanks for the flattery. Oh, it's midnight in London and you're up with us. How cool. Yeah, it's late. It's late. All right, you guys, you're awesome. Well, welcome to a whole new era where in your hands, you the people, you don't have to go begging to your doctor or somewhere else. You the people have enough data in your hands where you can really control your health. That is huge. Take control of your health. Now we have something that's usable and reliable as best we can. I really want you guys who are going to get this and read it. You can get it. And here's Angela's here. Oh, awesome. So good to see my friends coming up. All of you are my friends. And I'm so glad you're all smart enough to pick up on this topic because there's people who are like, nah, that can't be real. But oh boy, when it's real in a pretty ugly way. And you can do a lot and you can do most of what you need with the data and information that's in toxic superfoods itself. Because for many people, if you could just assess your diet and look at the 5 worst offenders in your diet, your spinach, your buckwheat, your almonds, some of the heavy hitters, you can take those down one at a time slowly and things start happening. But and for those of you who've been doing this oxalate thing for a while, you realize if you're kind of sick with oxalates, you need a little bit of a fine tuning going on. Yeah, people's eyes gain over. Yeah, because, well, what? Oxalates? I mean, a couple years ago, no one ever heard the word. And thanks to you guys and the internet and a lot of interviews, people are actually hearing the word oxalate and talking about it. And that's huge because you go from ignorance to familiarity and a lot of things become possible. It's very possible to help a lot of people feel better, do better, not age so much, have an easier time getting pregnant, easier babies to take care of, easier life overall. Yeah, frustrating. You guys are so cool for actually pushing this information out towards your friends and family and neighbors and so on. And I always remind people, it's not the people who already know you who are going to listen. It's the random person in the grocery store who's willing to take an angel's tip. Yeah, 14 months in, okay, that's good. You're getting better at this. But, sometimes it's a whole 3 or 4 years of some dicey stuff for people. Yeah, to anyone who will listen. Yeah, chaga is scary. And you see some scary numbers in here. This is color coded when you get to the data. So in the data companion, there's about 30 pages in the front explaining data. You really need to be thinking well about data and keep studying these books to really get some finesse in understanding what you're doing. Now, my father said his 5 children are all incredibly different from each other. All of them. We have the same genetics and the same growing environment. So if we were tomatoes on the same vine, we're all really different. So you can't have the food that was tested that gave us a number is not the same food that you just bought and you're going to eat. So don't get trapped into thinking you can micromanage oxalates down to the milligram. You can't. You'll never know. Now, the physical book is available through my website, not through Amazon. So you come to my website and you order it there. This is a print-on-demand company. It'll take them a few days to print it and mail it to you. And right now, it's only available in North America. We're working on international sales for Europe, and we'll keep expanding wherever the print-on-demand companies can handle it. But there's, if you go to SallyKnorton.com, you can go to the shop, and in the shop, you'll find the data companion. Anybody can get the electronic version, which is the PDF document, which is searchable. You may want to order both if you can get the data companion. And what you're going to notice real quickly when you flip through it is all the color in it. So the front explains the color in various tables and why what the bands of color mean in terms of how toxic, how concentrated the oxalate is in that food portion. right? It's not just the food, it's the food portion. If you eat only one spinach leaf, that's a low oxalate food. It's still spinach, but it's all about the amount. So dose makes the poison. So the dose of spinach, one leaf, no problem. You might even want a leaf if you're trying to adjust your oxalate intake so it's not too low. And some of you may know why you need to care about why it's too low. But the key thing is, don't get overly maniacal about having to add up every little thing. Get the big pieces right and try to relax a little bit. And hopefully the data will help you learn to relax. And the other thing is, don't try to memorize data, because the brain, not so good at remembering. Mine in particular can't remember numbers very well. Oh, yay, Australia's, boy, it must be early in the morning in Australia, right? It's Friday there. And you've got, the nice thing is you can quickly scan a list of foods and you can learn a lot of things, like what effects of cooking. Asparagus, the boiling doesn't seem to make any difference. The difference between, say, potato flour and potato starch, huge difference. 45 milligrams in potato flour versus 1 in potato starch, and you can't see that. But you'll be able to see this is really simple to use, just a few columns. There's different categories. You have to get used to the categories in the book. And eventually you start using it, it becomes familiar and you can play with it and really keep learning. Let me just mention and really solidify this idea. The oxalate that we eat really matters. It can make a difference in all different kinds of ways for different people. How well we perform, all of that stuff, how well we're aging. And it's the food piece. So there's a little bit of tendency, since it is a new topic and it is unfamiliar, and we have spent so long wanting vegetables to be heroes in the dietary world, and it turns out we were wrong about that. Not that many people want us to be wrong about vegetables aren't really the thing that's going to give you that vitality, vibrancy, longevity, and pain-free living that you want. So there's a sort of problem of denial, right? Where the ignorance helps us stay in our mental ruts and cultural ruts. And this is a complete game changer that's busting holes in everything we think is true, right? So somebody can eat potatoes. That's good. Some people don't do that well on the alkaloids in the nightshade vegetables. So everybody has to really customize what they're doing. And that's another reason why it's useful to have a full gamut of the testing available, because it gives you a lot more flexibility to really customize and find the foods that you do well on and you tolerate, and learn how to do the things you need to do to make it work in the long haul. Oxalate's a great way to get old and tired, isn't it? So some of us are ready to break out of the ruts that haven't been working for us. But there's a lot of folks who are making up stuff. There's this sort of inclinations like make partial facts. And so you can defend your own heart, soul, and thinking and your arguments, if you're in a discussion or debate, with a lot of the references that are cited in toxic superfoods. For example, what is the main source of oxalate in the human body? Over 50% of the oxalate that shows up in urine is coming directly from foods. That is, you ate the oxalic acid and then it showed up in your urine. And urine is the proxy for oxalate in the body. But you guys know that what shows up in the urine is not all the oxalate in the body. And that's something your doctor doesn't know. They don't realize how much of what we're eating ends up stuck in tendons and bones, bone marrow, glands, thyroid gland. They don't realize 4% or more of what you're eating is sticking to your tissues and continuing to stick because, hey, everybody eats little peanuts or potatoes or French fries or chocolate or what, all of these high oxalate foods are so common. They're just part of normal day-to-day living. And I'm taking a look at some of your comments. Yep, oxalate crystal. Yeah, so you can go back and rethink your own health history and different things that have happened. And now this provides the only rational explanation for what you've been through. Myelofibrosis in the bone marrow. Absolutely. There's I'm more and more convinced that blood diseases where the blood cells aren't well, the platelets aren't well, bone marrow related things, oxalate is the most likely culprit behind some of those diseases. And it's been really surprising to me how many different conditions could have an oxalate connection. It doesn't mean that oxalate causes all disease. It's that oxalate can cause any disease in any person, and it's different which persons. We have this fantasy in the way we put diagnostic labels on the body as if there's either no explanation or just one different explanation for each of these diseases. The truth is, if you get something in the cells that messes up their ability to produce energy and ability to defend themselves and ability to reproduce, that's the beginning of disease. It just depends which tissues are involved and how that plays out, and it shows up as a different set of symptoms. But underneath it, all of those diseases are the same problem, where the cells are struggling to have enough energy to be able to function properly and to be able to reproduce. You give them back their vitality by taking away the toxins and making sure they're nourished, and you're going to heal. You're meant to heal. So, oxalate in food matters. You can do a lot more in your life because food is the main source of oxalate in your body. Even though there are many scientific papers that were written before 2001 and even after 2001, because there's this echo chamber in science. A lot of people do not do their homework when they're writing their papers. And that's not just fifth graders, that's people with PhDs. They do not check their sources. They will cite some other outmoded, wrong source and keep moving bad information forward and keep repeating it and repeating it. So it's easy enough for people who are trying to tell you you're wrong to come up with a quote of, hey, 80% of oxalates is endogenous. That's not the case. And most of endogenous production, endogenous meaning it's being created in the body, is coming from vitamin C. And vitamin C is not an endogenous compound, right? You eat that, and these days you're taking it as a supplement or fortified foods. So how many Alka-Seltzer Golds can you have? You're using Alka-Seltzer Gold because you're managing the acidity that goes with all this inflammation with having oxalate problems. And you can take that 4 times a day if you need to. Use your symptoms of malaise and feeling loopy and out of it and see if it when you get enough to help you feel better. So you're kind of titrating it in. Have one at 10 o'clock, still bad at noon. Have some at noon, still bad at 1:30. Try it again. You can play with it. Oxalate transdermally. You definitely can absorb oxalic acid through the skin. And the usual way that's happening is using a cleaner like Barkeeper's Friend without gloves. So you don't want to use Barkeeper's Friend or Zud or those things without gloves. And chances are, if you're smart, you're not using those chemicals anymore. But you're, I don't know that many people who bathe in spinach or almond milk, but don't be tempted. So one thing that you will start to see is some of what I was describing in chapter 2 about where oxalates are in the food. You get used to that idea that the whole food will have all the oxalate, but when you split off the starch and the oil, you leave some oxalate behind. And oils and fats don't have oxalate. So you can use almond oil, peanut oil, those kinds of things, either topically or otherwise. And there's no oxalate in them because oxalate is a charged molecule that hangs out in the polar water fraction, whereas the fat is repelled by that polar fraction, like, salad dressing, the oil floats and the water's below that separation. So you get this separation. So that's why potato starch is another example of an extract. Herbal extracts, those are all low. And so you'll be able to see that whole has got the oxalates, whereas some of the extracts don't. But that's a rule of thumb. There are a couple of exceptions to that. So, yeah, so you don't understand oils for use like castor oil. So lotions and oils are not going to have oxalate because they're based on fat. As long as it's fat-based. And even the herbs that are in them are extracts, not whole herbs, because, chunks of plantness in a lotion, that would never sell. So the oils, don't worry about the topical lotions and oils and things like that. Okay? So what you're going to get with the data is a chance to really assess and keep relearning and doing a reality check with things and hopefully a little bit of flexibility in what you're eating so you can eat more foods and more relaxedly. Yes, olives are high, but not if you're eating two, and not if your diet is low in oxalate. You may need them because there's only 2 milligrams of oxalate in an olive. So you don't have to be zero olives just because they're high oxalate food. They're high oxalate food based on 100 milligrams portions. So you'll see in the data tables, you've got the amount of oxalate per 100 grams. That allows you to easily calculate all different kinds of portions. And then you've got the amount of oxalate in a typical portion. So we've worked hard to try to get the typical portions right. And if you see foods you think the typical portion is completely wrong, let us know because we can keep updating the book. And if there's major update on the ebook, we'll just send you that update for free. Can't do that with the print on demand, but we can issue coupons if there's some major update that needs to be shared. So oxalate in food matters. Nobody knew that until recently, and no one had a resource. And now we have the two key resources you need: an explanation of how this works, an explanation of how to lower safely and how to manage the recovery, and more data for those who really need to fine tune. And honestly, a lot of you don't really need this, but because you want to understand how this works and become more sophisticated and savvy in this, the information in here will help you do that. So hopefully you'll like that. Let us know. Just remember, Kidney International 2001. Kidney International is a journal. 2001 was the year this article was published, and one of a handful of articles published by Ross Holmes, who has been the international expert on food oxalates and kidney stones and food oxalates and getting in the body. He works with a guy named Goodman and Dean Asmos, and it was those three guys who put out that article that was the first to claim that at least 50% of the oxalates in the body and in the urine is coming from food. So don't let anybody, there's a lot of, people saying, food doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. And you've got the data and you've got the research that underlines that. And of course you have your own life experience that's shown you exactly that's the case. How dumping may be seasonal or reaction to other things like moon phases. There's a lot we don't understand about our connectivity to the cycles of the day and the month and the year and the moon. But we do know, for example, women's menstrual cycles are monthly, a lunar type cycle, the same 28 days as the typical cycle. So we're definitely affected by the tides and the sun, the stars, the moons in ways that science hasn't really, especially medical science, hasn't touched on. It's really, we as a community are one big learning organism. And me as a person who's been teaching and people have been sharing their stories with and working with clients, it's just become really obvious that a whole lot of us start dumping oxalates in the same week, right before solstice or here and there. So that's been really interesting, and it makes sense to me. And whether it's really the solstice or the onset of the winter, I don't know, maybe it's all part of the body expecting to go into a low oxalate mode in the winter. Maybe we're that programmed with oxalate. A lot of this is wild guessing, but interesting stuff to wonder about and stuff to realize, like, well, maybe it wasn't what you ate. Maybe it wasn't something you did wrong. It was just a thing that happened. So don't try to torture yourself with having to do everything perfectly right, because there's going to be cycles of clearing and healing and so on that come and go for reasons we can't fully understand. The kids and you dump at the same time. Interesting. Tea. You followed my advice and added tea. And for a lot of people, tea works really well. Think about tea. It's the ultimate extract of oxalate, where you've got oxalic acid floating in water. It's very dilute, and it very readily, quickly gets into the bloodstream. And so people who tolerate tea works really well. I'm allergic to tea, and it doesn't work for everyone, and it may not be enough oxalate. You might really have to use a lot of tea. 2 tea bags, 3 tea bags. Go ahead, make it strong enough. Don't be afraid to use enough tea or other forms of oxalate. Yes, so the book has made the arthritis pain go away more than the carnivore did. That's fascinating, Clover. That's cool. Tea. Yeah, if you can use tea, that's great, because that's a pretty low dose, but it's pretty potent. It goes in quickly. I think it comes in like one nice swish. And that swish, you want that kind of blob of oxalate exposure. That's something the body can hear. It's got to be the absorption that's being read, but I don't know what tissues, whether it's the vascular tissues, the bloodstream, the liver, but whoever's smart in there going, up, hey, here comes oxalate, everybody. Let's stop all this dumping. It really is a signal that says, oh, you have to go back into this holding mode or sequestration mode. It was in this clean out, guys, come on, clean out. And now you say, no. So you have this lever, and that's the place where having the data guide. Now you also have, if you come to my group classes, you'll have the 50 milligram dosing table. You have the dosing table in the back of Toxic Superfoods on page 288. So that table is there to tell you, well, if you need 20 or 30 milligrams, this is how much of these foods to use. I don't think I put beet juice in here. I wasn't at the time thinking beet juice was that useful, but I like beet juice as another option for adding enough oxalate easily because it's in a jar. You don't have to do anything. Just pour it in a little shot glass, knock it down, or turn it into a cocktail with some orange juice or something. You let me know if you come up with a beet juice dosing cocktail. You can put that on the website if you like. So, there's other ways where people are saying, well, if you just get your microbiome right, you just fix your gut. What's missing in people's understanding, it always has been, and what's really new with this understanding that's come from the community is this idea that we're all loaded up with oxalate. That's the really sticky wicket. You never really over your oxalate problem until the whole body is really done cleaning out. And for some of us, that's 11 or 12 years of cleaning out. So you can't really declare yourself oxalate tolerant. But I think what happens is what happened to me when I first started learning about the diet, with learning the foods and getting off my sweet potatoes and Swiss chard from the VP Foundation information, is that when I would have some sweet potato, I felt fine. In fact, sometimes I felt a little better. I didn't understand that by adding sweet potato, I was feeling better because I was turning off the clearing, because they never taught about this clearing thing. So that's still not understood. Just a very small subset of us understand that oxalate overload is not just your diet. Oxalate overload is your body. That's why oxalate overload is the condition you create because we oxalate overloaded diets. And so this is all too sophisticated for your doctor, by the way. Don't think they'll understand it anytime soon. Osteoarthritis, minimizing inflammation, managing 5 years of vegan spinach sweet potatoes. Yeah, that'll do you. Went to the dentist, no longer had TMJ, but felt dumping in her jaw. Yeah, exactly. TMJ, one of these common oxalate symptoms, tooth sensitivity, sinus pain, eye issues, night vision issues, funky hearing things, headaches, a lot of head stuff, a lot of head and brain issues with oxalate. Must have been her low oxalate diet. It's so exciting to see people get better, isn't it? It's really great. And a little bit of knowledge. This missing piece, oxalate really matters, and the oxalate in your food really matters. You've got the tools. There's more things coming out. You can come join us in my group meetings. I do group meetings at least a couple times a month. And that's really another chance to get more of this discussion with me about how to use the data and how to manage your oxalate clearing. So Jeannie DeAngelis has been having lots of crunching neck lately. The neck, is a really classic area for oxalates, as is I think the face and jaw and teeth. Yeah, the doctors know nothing about nutrition. Really, that's not what they're there for. That they didn't sign up to be nutritionists. But the neck is so interesting, because in the medical literature, the primary hyperoxaluria cases, there's several cases where the neck pain was all they had. So you could just for years have trouble looking over your shoulder when you're driving and think, my neck's just weird and stiff. That could be the beginning signs of an oxalate problem. How much beet juice a day? Try to do that to reduce the dumping. Yeah, so I usually suggest you try 2 to 3 ounces. So a jigger is that shot glass used to make mixed drinks. So 3 ounces would be 2 jiggers. So it might be 1.5 jiggers, somewhere between 1.5 and 2 jiggers, depending on how much your body needs to hear. And usually, if you get enough in a one quick dose, you want it in one lump. Don't just sip on it all day. That will never achieve what you want. That quick dose that we're getting from the tea and probably the beet juice. Within an hour, you should feel better. And a lot of people have told me, I think even Jeannie has said, 20 minutes, I can tell. So if you can't tell in an hour, you probably didn't get enough oxalate. The chronometer data does do pretty well. There's a little bit of wobbliness in it, but the data that they're using chronometer is pretty good, but not all the way good. But sure, use chronometer. You don't have to have this to do well. You really don't. But a lot of people want it, so here it is. It's a lot of work. It took a nutrition professional and a database professional. We worked on this thing for 6 years, trying to get the database working well and getting it to spit out data in a way that's manageable. And you will also, we've made sure you've got all the original sources in here. In the back, there's tons of pages of where all the data came from, but none of this is mucking up the tables. There's symbols in here so you can look up exactly, because we've done a lot of averaging, so you don't have 17 tests for spinach, right? So you guys, I'm really glad that you are on this journey of healing and really bringing back your health and making sure that your longevity is going to be fun instead of, what good is longevity if you're aching and paining and don't have your hip joints and you're like becoming a bionic person because your body parts need to be cut out? We can stop all that. You can save your joints and save your vitality and your independence. Heart beats harder. Oh, okay. So someone's mentioning calcium. So one last comment. If you're clearing oxalates from tissues and you're going through these cycles, when you bring oxalic acid back into the bloodstream, there's a very good chance that you're lowering the calcium levels in your blood. So most people really need that calcium, but the calcium can also encourage the dumping. And someone says they're using orange juice for citric acid. Surprisingly, oranges aren't that high in citric acid, so you would need a fair amount of orange juice, but it's better than nothing. And so citric acid is really nice and alkalizing, and that's its main advantage. And Donna's saying that the dumping causes just the weirdest, crazy symptoms, and they're never the same. They're in different body parts, they're different. Sometimes it's hot and swelly, sometimes it's not at all. Sometimes you got mucus coming up, the tartar, junk out of the eyes, buzzing ears, you name it. Gout, it's craziness. Calcium citrate. Yeah, you guys are doing great. So play around, come back to keep learning. And it's nice that you're letting people know. Thank you. Keep letting other people know that these superfoods are not our friends, and here's actual science to help them come on board. You need to keep learning. That's the value of the data book. Is a great way to keep thinking well. Please try to study the stuff up in the front section to try to get what I'm saying there. And come take advantage of the support meetings, because there we get to see each other's face, have a conversation, and I can teach more with visuals. So appreciate you guys being here, being patient with the book. Finally here. And stay in touch and let us know what you think. Appreciate you all. Have a great evening. See you next time. Bye.